I grew up with two alcoholic parents. They were just struggling to get by. My dad was pretty detached from the family. He wasn't able to provide me with the emotional and psychological support that I needed. And so I turned to the streets and I looked for a group of guys that could teach me how to be a man.
I grew up in West Seattle, pretty much very, very religious family. We did a lot of church. I feel like because maybe we did a lot of church, that's kind of what drew me to the streets, because we weren't allowed to do a lot of things that our friends could do. I had to see what I was missing. I wanted to get out in those streets, and when I got old enough, I thought I'd go see.
I think the first time that I ever actually broke the law, I was probably 12 or 13 years old. Me and my buddies, we would go into stores and steal cigarettes off the shelves because they were easily accessible back then. And I think my first charge was a shoplifting charge. And I went into juvie, I think, for 24 hours or something like that. My parents got me out. And it just slowly escalated.
After my second son, I gained more weight than I did with the first, and I couldn't lose it. The weight just was not coming off. A friend told me about cocaine, and so I started snorting it. And then eventually, I started using crack. Somebody told me that, I think the words were, "Oh, you're wasting it, using it that way. You need to try it this way." That's when things just really started going down, I think. At that time, I was working at the phone company, and I was able to manage it for a little while, but eventually I lost my job.
I started selling crank for a friend of mine, and I turned on all my buddies in Marysville to that stuff. And I'm kind of ashamed to say it, but a majority of those guys are still up there selling it and doing that. When I turned 19, I got my first DUI, and I went and did 24 hours in Evergreen Camp back then. I think 2 years later, I got another one when I was 21 years old, which was this never-ending cycle of failure at life, basically.
That's when I began to shoplift to support my habit. And just kind of running the streets, was in jail from the north end of Seattle, Snohomish County, to Pierce County. Spent a lot of time in jail. I did that for about 6.5 years.
I was homeless for a while. In the grip of my drug addiction, once I got to a point to where I started using heroin, I just went to the streets for about 1.5 years. I don't even have a desire to go get a job at this point. I'm just out committing crimes at night, high on meth and smoking heroin all day, staying asleep, and just feeding my addiction that way. I just take to that lifestyle like a duck in water because I just know it so well.
I would leave my kids with friends and say, "I'm gonna be right back," and I'd be gone for days. My oldest son, who was 8 at the time, somewhere I left him, called my mom and dad, told them that, Mom's gone and we don't know where she's at, and so to come get them. My mom told me that we came and got Kevin and Joey. I don't want to say I abandoned them, but because it hurts to say that, but I guess I did.
I remember I was high on heroin with my kids trick-or-treating with the now ex-wife and her sister and, the whole family. And they knew that I was high, and they let me stay that night. And the next day she said, "Derek, you gotta go." And so I said, "Okay." And I grabbed a backpack and I packed it full of clothes, and my son Brandon was sitting on the bed. I just walked up to him like it was nothing, and I just gave him a hug and I said, "I love you, but I gotta go." I kind of had some tears in my eyes, but I knew that this was what I was gonna do. And just looking at that little guy's face, because all he's ever wanted was his dad, And so I was like, all right, I gotta go. And I hit the street, and I went right back to the same crowd that I was running with.
The last time I went to jail, the judge told me that my next stop will be Purdy. At about that 6.5 year point, I was just done. And when they told me Purdy was the next stop, that just helped my decision to not be on the streets anymore.
The scary thing about the heroin is that at one point it removed all emotion from me. I remember sitting there talking to a guy that I used to use with, and we'd have these conversations about our family. And I tell him that I miss my family, but I don't really feel any loss of love. And that scared me. I didn't like that because I know I loved my kids, but it was almost like I just didn't care anymore. And that's what that drug did to me. Either way, it was enough to scare me into saying, I need some help.